Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive. Before we even get into the tactical breakdown of what was just undeniably a historic weekend of international rugby, I need you to do yourself a quick favor and subscribe to Rugby Obsession.
Yeah, you really need to if you want to make sense of all this chaos.
Exactly. I mean, if you want to stay ahead of the curve when the established order of the sport just gets completely turned upside down, hit that subscribe button. We're going to be dissecting these massive shifts all season long.
And you definitely want to be part of the conversation for this one. It truly was a weekend that forces a complete reevaluation of the international landscape.
Oh, without a doubt.
The hierarchy of the game looks entirely different today than it did when the teams ran out of the tunnels on Friday night.
It really does. And to help us navigate this this completely altered landscape, we're leaning into a fantastic piece of sports journalism today.
Jared Wright's piece, right?
All right, an article by Jared Wright, published in Planet Rugby on March 7th, 2026. Our mission today is to unpack this article and understand exactly how round 4 of the Six Nations just completely blew up the world rugby rankings.
The sheer thrill of these matches, the unpredictability of the tactics, it is just spectacular to witness.
It really is. And as we go through this, I want you, the listener, to jump into the comments. Tell us your thoughts, share your opinions on these historic upsets.
Because if you are anything like us, you were probably pacing around your living room all weekend.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't sit down.
It is the kind of weekend that validates your investment as a fan, you know? When the old guard gets shaken up this violently, it reminds everyone that reputation alone doesn't win test matches.
No.
Doesn't. You actually have to deliver for the full 80 minutes, or the ranking math will punish you severely.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start by setting the stage with Friday's match.
The Ireland and Wales game.
Yeah, because it really established the baseline for the entire weekend's ranking mathematics. We had Ireland and Wales going head-to-head. It was a fiercely contested, incredibly physical game.
Very physical.
And Ireland ultimately claimed a hard-fought 27-17 victory. Now, Wales came into this clash as the heavy underdogs.
But they certainly didn't play like it.
Not at all. They made Andy Farrell's Irish squad work for every single inch of turf. They were defending aggressively, disrupting the breakdown.
And it a real test.
They did. But the truly wild part regarding the rankings is this. Despite securing the win in a tough test match, Ireland did not earn a single rating point.
Not a fraction of a point.
They held firm at number 3 globally, but the math gave them absolutely zero upward momentum for the victory.
Which perfectly illustrates the sometimes ruthless nature of the World Rugby ranking system. It operates on an exchange system based on relative strength.
Right.
Because Ireland was so heavily favored going into Friday, and because of the massive existing points gap between them and the Welsh squad, simply grinding out a 10-point win wasn't enough to generate any mathematical reward.
They were just holding the line.
They were essentially defending their own territory rather than conquering new ground. They went into the weekend sitting right around the 89-point mark, and they left the weekend with that exact same number.
Which feels brutal after an 80-minute war.
It does. But Jared Wright made a brilliant point in his analysis. Andy Farrell's team was actually walking a tightrope. If things had played out differently in Saturday's fixture, Ireland would have surrendered that third-place global spot entirely, despite having won their own game.
Wow.
Yeah. They were completely reliant on a favorable outcome at Murrayfield to maintain their standing.
Which is a terrifying position for a top-tier team to be in, right?
Yeah.
Relying on another squad to do you a favor.
It really is.
And if Ireland was hoping for a quiet, predictable Saturday to protect their ranking, they were in for a massive shock. Because if Friday's match was about holding the line, Saturday at Murrayfield was about completely tearing the line down and setting it on fire.
What's fascinating here is how Scotland didn't just manage to scrape by with a narrow win, they completely dismantled the expected narrative.
Oh, they tore it apart.
We are talking about a breathtaking 50-40 win over a French team that was actively, aggressively chasing a Grand Slam.
50 points in a Six Nations test match against France. It is almost difficult to wrap your head around that level of scoring.
Putting 50 points on the board against this specific iteration of Les Bleus is a monumental tactical achievement.
Jared Wright hit the nail on the head in his Planet Rugby piece when he called it shocking tactical arrogance from the French side.
That is a strong phrase.
It is, and you really do not often see a top-tier championship contending team accused of tactical arrogance. But when you look at how the match unfolded, you can see exactly what he means.
They seem to abandon the fundamentals.
Completely. They were throwing loose offloads, trying to play champagne rugby out of their own 22, and seemingly looking right past the opponent standing in front of them.
That is a profound observation by the journalist, and it translates directly to what we saw on the pitch. When a team is pursuing a grand slam, there is an inherent psychological danger of looking ahead to the final trophy rather than focusing on the 80 minutes at hand.
Looking past the immediate threat.
Exactly. That shocking tactical arrogance implies a French side that believed their own hype a little too much. They failed to respect the defensive structure and the lethal counter-attacking threat that Scotland possesses.
And the Scots capitalized brilliantly on every single French error.
They really did. Wright noted that Scotland truly earned the right to dream, and they did that by punishing France's looseness with clinical precision.
But we should probably talk about the end of the game, right?
Yes, however, it is vital to look at the nuances of that incredibly high-scoring final result. The narrative of the match is slightly skewed by the final 10 minutes.
Right, because France actually managed to cross the try line 3 times very late in the game, which makes that 50-40 scoreline look a little more respectable than the actual run of play suggested.
Much more respectable.
For about 70 minutes, Scotland was completely running away with it.
Precisely. Those 3 late tries significantly flattered the scoreline for Les Bleus, making it look like a shootout rather than a tactical dismantling.
Yeah.
But more importantly than preserving a shred of pride, those late frantic scores actually saved France from a catastrophic plunge in the global rankings.
Oh, the math again.
Exactly. Even with the loss, and despite dropping well over a full rating point, France managed to desperately cling to 4th place overall.
Wow, just barely holding on.
If Scotland had maintained the wider margin of victory that they held earlier in the second half, France's rating would have plummeted. And that is exactly where Ireland's 0-point weekend would have come into play. Ireland would have been safely insulated in 3rd, while France fell away.
So France basically survives a total ranking disaster by the skin of their teeth, all thanks to a late-game scramble when the match was already lost.
That's exactly what happened.
But let's shift the focus back to the victors, because the atmosphere at Murrayfield was absolutely electric. What did this masterclass actually do for Scotland's standing in the world?
The reward for Scotland was substantial. They gained over 1 1/3 rating points for the victory.
That's a huge jump.
It is. Now, looking at the overall standings, they do remain in 7th place. However, the middle of the pack has completely rearranged itself based on this result. Scotland has now made up significant ground on the top 5.
So they're closing the gap.
Yes, and they have built a very comfortable multi-point buffer over 8th-placed Australia, specifically a 1.5-point gap. They are no longer looking over their shoulders. They are consolidating their power in that upper middle tier and looking strictly upward at the teams ahead of them.
It is phenomenal momentum for a Scottish squad that proved they can hang half a century of points on one of the best teams in the world.
Truly phenomenal.
And speaking of not missing out on the action, if you are enjoying this breakdown of how the on-field tactics are blowing up the off-field rankings, make sure you hit subscribe on Rugby Obsession. We are constantly analyzing the mechanics of the sport, decoding the math, and bringing you the stories behind the scorelines. We want you right there with us for every deep dive.
And you won't want to miss what happened next, because the tactical drama certainly didn't stop in Edinburgh. In fact, Scotland's offensive clinic was merely the prelude to the most seismic historical shift of the entire weekend.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because as stunning as Scotland's 50-point game was, the final match of the round delivered a shockwave that people will be talking about for decades.
Oh, without a doubt.
We are heading to Rome, where Italy defeated England 23-18, and we really need to pause and emphasize the pure historical weight of this result. Decades of Six Nations matchups, generations of players. Through all of that history, Italy had never beaten England.
Nope.
This is the Azzurris' first ever win in the history of this fixture. They finally toppled the English giant, the emotion pouring out of the stands, the players in tears. It was an all-time great rugby moment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't just a feel-good story for Italian rugby. It is a paradigm-shifting result for the international game as a whole.
How so?
For years, there have been critics questioning Italy's place in the tournament, suggesting they couldn't compete with the established powerhouses. When a historical streak of that magnitude is broken with a gritty, tactically sound 23-18 victory, it silences those critics and sends shockwaves through the entire ranking
It
ecosystem.
really validates their presence.
Exactly. And Jared Wright's piece highlights a brilliant piece of trivia. Despite all the chaos of the weekend, this specific match in Rome produced the only actual change in ranking positions across the entire global top tier.
Wow, really?
Yes, the only position change.
It's the kind of gritty, defensive masterclass that makes you rethink everything you assumed about the hierarchy of European rugby. Italy didn't just get lucky. They managed the game, they kicked their penalties, and they held strong when England pushed back.
They earned every bit of it.
Let's look at the mathematical reality for Italy following this historic upset. What did breaking that decades-long curse actually buy them on the global stage?
The rankings fallout for Italy is incredibly positive, yet it is agonizingly close to pushing them even higher. This historic victory earned them just over 1.25 rating points, specifically 1.28 points.
Okay.
They remain in 10th place globally, but let's look at what that means in practical terms. First, they have completely detached themselves from the lower tier. They now have a massive, seemingly insurmountable 7-point buffer over 11th place Japan.
So they are safe from dropping down.
Yes, Italy does not have to worry about dropping out of the top 10 anytime soon.
They have secured their base camp, and now they are looking exclusively up the mountain.
Exactly. And when they look up, the view is incredibly encouraging. They see 9th-placed Fiji sitting just a fraction of a single point ahead of them.
How close are we talking?
They are virtually neck and neck. Italy trails Fiji by a microscopic 0.05 rating points. One more positive result, or even a slight slip-up by Fiji in a future international window, and Italy will ascend into the single digits.
That is incredible.
It is a testament to the steady, undeniable progress that the Italian program has made.
So what does this all mean for the team on the wrong end of that historic upset? Because if Italy is riding an emotional high and closing the gap on the top 9, the environment inside the English camp has to be incredibly toxic right now. Losing a game you have historically never lost is a tough pill to swallow.
Grim is an understatement. It is bordering on a full-blown crisis. The situation for Steve Borthwick's men is dire.
Yeah, the press has not been kind.
Jared Wright's article outlines a true free fall for England. And to put this in perspective, you have to look at the timeline. England began 2026 sitting comfortably in 3rd place globally. They were considered a stable, top-tier threat.
3rd place on the world just a few short months ago. And now they're the team making the wrong kind of history in Rome.
Yes. By losing to Italy, they forfeited a massive chunk of rating points. 1.28 points vanished instantly. That specific loss means they have now surrendered 3 full ranking positions in just 4 rounds of Six Nations action.
3 spots in 4 rounds.
They have plummeted from 3rd all the way down to 6th place. It is a staggering collapse of form and standing in an incredibly compressed time frame.
From 3rd to 6th in 4 matches. That is the kind of slide that gets coaches fired and entire squads overhauled.
And the zero-sum nature of the rankings means that when a giant like England falls, someone else silently benefits from the gravity, right?
Precisely. England's slide directly allowed Argentina to move up into the top 5.
Oh, wow. Argentina didn't even have to lace up their boots or take the field to improve their global standing this weekend. They simply sat back and watched England tumble right past them in the math.
Just reaping the rewards of an off week.
England is now sitting tied on overall points with France, but because of the decimal tiebreakers, France retains 4th, Argentina sits happily in 5th, and England is relegated to 6th.
And as Jared Wright points out in his analysis, the nightmare for Steve Borthwick's squad might not be over. The math and the schedule could get even worse next weekend.
The pressure is immense.
We're looking at a final round where England has to face France and Scotland goes up against Ireland. If England fails to beat a French team, desperate to prove their 50-point defensive collapse was a fluke, and if Scotland manages to ride their current momentum to a win over Ireland, we could see England drop even further down the ladder.
That is a very real possibility.
The pressure on that English squad going into the final round is going to be absolutely suffocating. Every single decision, every drop ball is going to be magnified.
It creates a truly fascinating psychological dynamic for the final weekend of the tournament. You have an England team absolutely desperate to halt a historic slide and save face, going up against a French team that just gave up 50 points and is clinging to fourth place by a thread.
Talk about an immovable object and an unstoppable force, but both are wounded.
Both teams are wounded, both teams have massive points to prove, and the stakes for that upcoming match couldn't be higher, strictly from a global positioning and pride standpoint.
It is going to be incredibly tense, bruising rugby. And this is exactly why we do these deep dives and why you, the listener, need to care about the intricacies of these rankings. Because this weekend proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the old guard of international rugby is vulnerable.
Highly vulnerable.
The established hierarchies are crumbling. When a team chasing a Grand Slam gives up 50 points, and when a team that has never won a specific fixture in its history grinds out a victory, he tells you that the game is more unpredictable and thrilling than it has been in years.
The margins have just disappeared.
The history books are literally being rewritten in front of our eyes, and reputation guarantees you nothing on the pitch.
It truly is a golden era for the neutral fan. When the gap between the top tier and the middle tier shrinks this drastically, every single test match becomes appointment viewing. You can no longer look at a schedule and easily predict the blowouts.
Absolutely. And that brings us right back to you. We want to hear from you down in the comments. What was the defining moment of the weekend for you?
That's a tough choice.
Were you more stunned by Scotland finding gaps everywhere and hanging 50 points on a Grand Slam chasing French team? Or were you more blown away by Italy's tactical discipline in securing their historic first-ever win against England in Rome? Drop your thoughts below, debate it out with the community, and let us know how you are processing this wild weekend of rugby.
The contrast between those two specific matches is so stark. One was an absolute high-scoring shootout characterized by tactical looseness, and the other was a gritty defensive breakthrough built on discipline.
Two completely different ways to shock the world.
It will be incredibly interesting to see which result the community feels has the longer-lasting impact on the sport.
And while you are down there dropping your opinions in the comments, do not forget to give that final enthusiastic push to the subscribe button. Subscribe to Rugby Obsession so we can keep bringing you these deep dives, unpacking the elite sports journalism, the underlying stats, and the stories that matter most to the game we love.
This raises an important question, however, and it's a critical nuance we need to touch on before we wrap up today's analysis.
Oh, there's a darker side of the weekend.
Yes. We have spent this entire discussion rightfully celebrating these glorious on-field achievements, the brilliant tries, the historic underdog wins, the massive ranking shifts. But if you look closely at Jared Wright's source material, there is a lingering thought drawn from the headlines that casts a rather dark shadow over the weekend's festivities.
The officiating.
Exactly. Amidst all the celebrations, veteran referee Nigel Owens was noted publicly slamming a severe lack of TMO intervention regarding a, quote, Scotland gouging accusation.
Wow. That is an incredibly heavy accusation to just be sitting there in the background of such a celebrated, high-scoring victory. Eye gouging is one of the absolute darkest arts of the game.
It really is.
And for a respected voice like Nigel Owens to call out the officials for missing it is massive.
It's a stark reminder of the physical realities of the sport, and it leaves you to wonder, as the on-field rugby gets increasingly competitive, as the stakes get higher and these historic program-defining wins are on the line, how much will off-field controversies and officiating limitations threaten to overshadow the players' incredible achievements?
Because we rely so heavily on the TMO now.
We rely entirely on the television match official to catch these incidents in real time. But when you have a legendary official like Nigel Owens publicly criticizing the technology and the intervention protocols for something as serious as a gouging accusation, it reminds us that the technological systems governing the game are still struggling to keep pace with the sheer speed and dark arts of the modern game.
It is a brilliant, provocative point to end on. You have this incredible juxtaposition. The ultimate high of the players rewriting decades of history with their skill and grit, contrasted against the frustrating reality that the officiating technology might still be missing crucial, dangerous moments in the rucks.
It's a lot to think about before the next round.
It is definitely something for all of us to mull over as we look ahead to the tension of the final round next week. Thank you for listening to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive, and we'll look forward to you listening to our next episode.